The Federal and Thomas Hospital Puliangudi jointly present the Tenkasi Marathon 2025. This event is co-presented by Selvarani Readymades and powered by Repco Home Finance and Sriram Nalamani Yadava Educational Institutions. Run for Health on Sunday, June 29.
There was fear that police would come and take them away to family planning camps. Indira Gandhi's advisors were from the CPI, who suggested a Russian type of governance for the country. The government today, so many issues relating to manipulation of the democracy, unseating of governments, toppling governments, breaking parties, winning over MLAs, curbing of fundamental rights, press censorship, and a kind of fear psychosis. Trains were running on time. It's amazing in this country what fear can do.
Prime Minister Indira Gandhi declared emergency on 25th June 1975, exactly 50 years ago. During the emergency period, many opposition leaders were arrested. Media was censored. On the other hand, for the ordinary common people, Janata meals, 1 rupee meals were available in all the hotels. Trains were running on time, and many such other issues. So, what was the impact of emergency rule in India? Let's talk to senior journalist Mr. R. Rangaraj. He worked as a field reporter during the emergency period. Hello, sir. Welcome to the show. Sir, you were a journalist when the emergency rule was declared. What was your initial reaction? How did you receive the news, and what went into the first day of emergency?
Of course, the emergency was announced late at night, so it was only next morning. We turned up in the office. I worked as a reporter for the Indian Express in Chennai. So in the office there were some editorial meetings and so on, because we had to grapple with the issue of press censorship. As you know, during the emergency, all publications were subjected to censorship, and there were guidelines issued that we had to get all our copies approved by the censor officer who belonged to the Press Information Bureau at Shastri Bhavan. So every day we had to get our copies cleared. So the first few days there was confusion and chaos, because the articles had to be submitted for clearance and so on, and we had to go through the drill of censorship. So I was among the reporters who carried the flong, as it was, the mold for printing, which had to be approved by the censor officer. So every night I used to travel to the censor office at Shastri Bhavan.
And that has to be done by all the newspapers?
Yes, all the newspapers had to fall in line.
Even the radio shows?
See, at that time we had only Doordarshan TV channel. We didn't have channels like today, and the only radio channel was All India Radio. We didn't have FMs also. So the censorship did not affect the television and radio, which are already government controlled. So we didn't have channels and FMs like today.
Okay.
Nor did we have social media like today. So there was no internet or things like that for people to voice their opinion. So in the context of the new regime and the change, our working styles had to undergo a change, and we were generally given instructions to play safe and not invite the wrath of the censors. So after the first few days, things settled down. It was business as usual, and care was taken to edit copies, and also impose some kind of self-censorship was imposed in our own offices, where sanitized versions were put out for clearances. And in general, there were very few occasions when the censor officer and PAB had to make changes in our copies from Chennai, because the office generally took a decision not to incur the wrath of the censors. So they were playing it safe.
Were there any news media publications that resisted the censorship? Any organization that was closed down? Any examples?
See, in Indian Express, for the first few days there were some kind of mild protests. There were some blank spaces about articles which had been cut out by the censors. But thereafter, it was a normal routine course.
When you see a blank page on a newspaper, you would understand that
the censors had cut out some portions.
Okay.
Tuklak, for instance, was one publication which was greatly affected because it was essentially anti-Congress, and Choi's Ramaswamy was known for his pungent articles, of course with wit and sarcasm.
It was a magazine. Tughlaq was a
Tuklak was
magazine.
a magazine in Tamil, and they brought out editions with sometimes with some blank spaces. So just to indicate that there had been articles had been cut by the censors. But barring Tuklak, there were not many publications which defied the government, and by and large, publications they fell in line with the instructions of the censor officers.
Sir, what was the socio-political scene at that time? Many opposition leaders were arrested. In the northern part of India, there were many sterilization camps. Many people were evicted from slums. What was the socio-political scene during the emergency rule?
After Karnanidhi became a quite a vocal critic. Perhaps if he was not so bitter in his criticism, the government might have even continued till the end of the emergency. So June 1975 to January 1976, the DMK government was in power in Tamil Nadu. After the dismissal of the government, there were a few arrests of some second-rung functionaries, including T.R. Balu, later Union Minister. M.K. Saran was also arrested. Most of the sterilization issues, these were by and large in the north. In South India, family planning exercises were there, but they went on in a peaceful manner and there were no untoward incidents.
So, what was the impact of emergency rule in the next election when the emergency was lifted? What was the impact in the election results?
Yeah, 1977 elections were held after emergency was revoked, and the issues in the north did not reflect much in the south. Uh, Forced family planning drive, sterilization drive, and all that. There were a lot of issues in North India. There were some incidents, and this spread like wildfire across villages. And there was fear that police would come and take them away to family planning camps. Such issues were not there by and large in South, especially in Tamil Nadu. So the South voted massively in favor of the Congress and other combined. Did it mean that politically issues like press censorship, freedom of the press, arrest of opposition leaders, uh, did it mean that the people were not much concerned about these issues in the South India? I can't say. Maybe people would have felt that arrest of opposition leaders was not necessary, or was the emergency necessary at all. But
it did not reflect in the results.
did not reflect, and perhaps that was not the main issue for them. Perhaps they were thinking more of livelihood, bread and butter issues.
So, what was the impact of emergency rule on a common man, a daily wage, an ordinary citizen?
See, it's difficult to say, but for the common man, they had introduced certain measures like the Janata meal, 1 rupee in all hotels were asked to serve lunch at rupee 1, which was a big relief for many people. I mean, reeling under cost of living and so on. I myself had lunch at 1 rupee most of the time during the emergency because I was working on a princely salary of rupees 200.
Okay.
We couldn't afford extravagant lunches and so on. So it is okay. And I found a lot of people coming to these hotels and having the meal. The restriction on weddings that more than 50 guests cannot attend, my opinion is a good thing because so much of money is wasted in the country. Today is worse on ostentatious weddings. I would say if some government brings back that provision, it's good because the current style of weddings leads many people to penury and debts. So that was one welcome feature I could see. And on the other level, there were orders issued against usurious rates of interest being levied by moneylenders. And there was one section which said that materials, properties lodged with these moneylenders were all sought to be returned to the original owners. So there was a curious sight one morning in Roypeta, in the heart of Chennai, when there was a mile-long queue, the huge crowds near the Roypeta police station, where they were retrieving the bicycles mortgaged by them with a moneylender.
Okay.
There were thousands of bicycles. In fact, in those days, bicycle was the common mode of transport.
Okay.
The scooter and motorcycles were all a bit of a luxury. Forget about cars. And there were thousands of cycles kept there, stashed. All these people who had pledged their bicycles for sake of a few rupees. The as per the government order, all these articles were returned to them without having to pay the balance amount. So these kind of things were also happening, and trains were running on time. I don't know. It's amazing in this country what fear can do. So and government staff were available in their seats, and corruption by and large reduced because the officers were scared to, employees were scared to seek bribes. So maybe all this had some effect on the poor and the lower middle class.
So, what was the long-term impact of emergency in India? How it reflected?
The emergency was a draconian act. Let's not make any mistake. It's a curbing of fundamental rights, press censorship, uh, and a kind of fear psychosis that was spread across the people. The emergency deserved to be thrown out, and the rulers had to suffer at least for one election. This is the right thing, and God forbid no government should ever think of bringing out the emergency. Even though the emergency, it was said, was largely brought about by Indira Gandhi's advisors who were from the CPI, who suggested a Russian type of governance for the country to solve many of its problems. Uh, but it was an experiment that did not succeed. Even so, have we learned from the lessons of the emergency? I would say not. Even today, in terms of freedom of the press, India ranks very low in the world. In terms of human rights, again, we rank very low. So it shows there are issues relating to freedom of the press. There are issues relating to human rights. And many opposition leaders believe there's an undeclared emergency in the country. They're not far wrong, because if you see, there are so many ways in which press and independent journalists are being throttled. So when you take that into account, uh, if you see freedom of the press and other issues, they're relevant, even more relevant today than before. But there's a very grave danger of this becoming worse in the days to come. So it's not as if there is no shadow of the emergency. There is, and it is for the people and the political parties to design ways in which these have to be countered. Look, just because people win elections like 1977, I'll say Congress swept the South. What did it mean? People can interpret it in so many ways. Even today, the government today, there are so many issues relating to manipulation of the democracy, unseating of governments, toppling governments, breaking parties, winning over MLAs, MPs from one side to another, and formation of governments by hook or crook. All these are also relevant issues. But still, in some states, we find the party that is perpetrating these crimes are winning the elections. So, does it mean people support these actions? Not, maybe not. Maybe they don't see it as a major issue. They don't see such values as a major issues when they are faced with issues concerning their own livelihood. So it's a different ball game altogether. But the opposition has to find some way in which they make these issues relevant to the common man and expose the misdeeds and goings on that happen across the country, even though there's a democracy.
The Federal and Thomas Hospital jointly present the Tenkasi Marathon 2025. This event is co-presented by Selvarani Readymades, powered by Repco Home Finance and Sriram Nallamani Yadava Educational Institutions, along with associate sponsors Treasure Island International School, Homeway Properties, PPR Power Tech, and Premium Samsung Cafe. Run for Health on Sunday, June 29. Entry is free. All are welcome.